He doesn't like when you touch his nipples. Anyways. Continuing the wrist release type techniques, but we're going to be adding some sort of structural damage to it, small joint manipulation. So, reviewing that once again, if he's grabbing the wrist here, okay, I could be like, not that wrist, the other wrist. All right, this hand goes over the top, and then I'm pressing this here. So, once again, off of that, doesn't really matter how he grabs. I'm worried about where the thumb is. I'm circling that, and then I'm pressing. So, if he grabs from this side here, it's the same thing. I'm trying to figure out where that is and going here. The stronger the person is, the more my body is going to circle in. Like I'm going to close that distance. Yep. And then I'm going to use a little bit more leverage, right? So if he grabs my wrist again here, okay, I'm not going against the fingers. I go towards the thumb, and then I usually like to shadow where their arm is as that works in. Right, so all of those work. You can play the little game where if he grabs my wrist here, I go here, he's grabbing this wrist, and then I'm just being uh, proactive in that motion. A little bit of a help to this is obviously if you know that that grab is happening or you're seeing it happen, the rotation towards the thumb immediately before it secures is obviously going to help. I like to do the demo where that person grabs me and I'm like, you have a good grip, hold on to that really, really strong. And then in turn, I start to rotate. That way, people can understand that you're not going to be able to hold on to that even if you set that grip. Okay. But in an actual scenario, as I see that happening, that grip happening, I'm going to rotate there and be like, stop doing that. Right. I don't want. I don't want them to secure the grip. But that is basic hand fighting, but nothing happens to that person, right? So if he reaches and he grabs and I go here, he's not going to be very impressed with that. And then all of a sudden the altercation isn't happening. So let's add a couple techniques to both types of wrist grabs. That will kind of motivate them to not grab your wrist anymore. So off of the cross grip here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to place my hand directly on top. This is a trap. All I'm going to do from here is I'm going to create a very large circle to the outside. Now, the more he maintains the grip on my wrist, the more effective this is. I'm going to rotate as big of a circle as possible. These two fingers are going to hook onto his forearm. Now, I'm going to pull my elbows to my chest and press them down, in which case it will secure a side wrist lock here. If you step back as you do that, your knee can drive forward and give him a love tap to his face. Cross grip again. Here, 1, 2, pull it into my chest as I step back, and then do whatever mean stuff you want to do. That technique can also be changed by going one, and instead of pulling into your chest, you can point down. All right, and that's a better angle from this side. He reaches and grabs. My hand is going to trap the same way. Big circle, and I'm going to point to his opposite foot, right? So what happens, I go here, and then I point down. And what happens is he has a tendency to want to kneel in front of me. So off of this grab, hands here, and then I point. This is nothing more than a side wrist lock. You should start to pick up on the fact that I am adding or working off of techniques that we have covered previously. So I taught how to do a side wrist lock like this, and in which case now what I'm doing is I'm using different angles to show the exact same kind of lock, but in different scenarios. So the idea of this class, once again, is not that I'm expecting someone to grab like that. I am just showing how to manipulate the body in various positions. And so that's the purpose of that. Same side wrist grab goes into a finger lock. So what happens if we grab here? I'm going to turn the palm up. My fist goes underneath so that my forearm is going to clip. So we go. Watches are exposed to the camera. I'm going to rotate this down. You'll notice that the fingers are then exposed. I can lock and then I can apply pressure there. So again, we're here. I'm rotating in, pulling down to expose the fingers as I go here. Okay. Always have questions on, well, what about the other arm? So like if he's grabbing here, ooh, he's grabbing here, and I start to do this type of technique. If I sense any type of motion with his right arm, I'm just going to stop and then start working here, right? So the whole purpose of control tactics or control techniques is you're trying to be professional. You're trying to do minimal damage without blunt trauma. Blunt trauma is going to increase the level of violence intensity, right? So if he grabs my wrist and I just do this and then I hit him and then I get on top of him and I'm just beating the living crap out of him on the ground, that's going to be a little bit different than me breaking his finger, holding onto him, being like, sure, that there was no reason to do that. The professionalism is higher, but the techniques are going to be more difficult to do. So you want to give them the option to do that. Do I believe that wrist grabs into manipulation like this is more effective than just striking them? No. The fact is that if you cause blunt trauma immediately, so meaning like he grabs my wrist here and then I knee him in the groin and I headbutt him and then he lets go and then I just start, going to town on him. That is obviously a much easier way to make him let go of the wrist. But there are many, many, many environments where that is probably frowned upon. What happens when somebody that grabs your wrist is somebody that's scared? Maybe you're a large male and a female grabs you. Um, you know, somebody that's underage. There's a lot of these different scenarios where you should just be able to do one of these small techniques, control the scenario, and then go from there. Another technique that you can do from the same side, wrist grab. So we're here, is when I go up, I turn this in, my thumb goes directly underneath the backside, and then I'm grabbing here. My other hand goes back, and then I would just throw him onto his back. That is just a normal wrist lock. But what happens is we're here, I'm rotating in, and then I'm driving into that position. Lots and lots of different techniques that destroy the anatomy off of grabs, but depends on how long I want to do the class and what techniques are going in. You just start to see the same kinds of concepts. All right. So hope you're enjoying the content so far. We'll get into the next technique soon. What we're doing is going into the last few techniques. We're going to be doing cross wrist grab, same side wrist grab. At this point, everybody's fingers and thumbs and everything's just ow, and so they're wanting to stop. The idea is to just show enough to show them how to manipulate the body. So when we start getting into stuff like ripping someone out of a vehicle, I can reference all of these techniques and go, hey, I showed you how to do this. So now what happens is after I elbow them in the head, I can grab their fingers, break their stuff. And what will happen is you'll get a better reaction out of it. So when you start to get into more realistic techniques and you see the opportunity for small joint manipulation, then you can actually capitalize on that. Just going for these techniques does fall into the magical techniques category where everybody calls bullshit on it. The idea is that you are going to implement this type of trauma when it is easily accessible and they are not thinking about it. These last few techniques are basically just variations of a lot of the other techniques that I worked on. So we'll go off of a cross wrist grab. We worked on thumb manipulation the first time. So one of the easiest ways to make them let go is to support the back joint right here. My fingers wrap in front, and then that's going to make them want to let go. Their fingers will open up, in which case I can go into finger locks there. Okay, so the thumb technique is once again driving that thumbnail through this knuckle. So once I understand that concept, I can lock it in. I am pinning it to my abdomen as I'm doing that so that it's harder for him just to rip his hand out. Okay, so I'm not doing this, in which case there's a lot of space there. I'm pulling this into my body so I can secure that. Once again, if I ever worry about the other hand, I can just block this by putting my hands up and then working. The whole entire purpose of the technique is to make them let go. And so if they let go, then I've succeeded. So I'm going here. I'm locking this in here. There is another technique that we call a gooseneck. So if you take his little thumb and you point it like this, right? So that looks like a little goose. right? What we're going to do is we're going to take the goose head and make it point back that way. And the way that we do that is I reach over with my elbow, I grab his thumb here, and then I pull my elbow back over the top while holding onto his hand, right? So I go here, lock this in, stop his hand from following. So if all I do is I twist, his hand kind of goes with it. If I hold on to his hand and then I pull, what'll happen is you don't have the ability to relieve that pressure. Next technique, cross wrist grab here. I can rotate underneath off of this trap, then grab the wrist. Now I can expose the back of their elbow, and now I can hyperextend. Right about here, I would step in, and as I hit, step back so that I can cause structural damage to the elbow joint. So now what we're doing is we're kind of like bridging the techniques from the small motions to larger joints. Remember that larger joints are much harder to destroy, but they will cause a bigger reaction as far as what's happening. So if I break his arm violently, there's a higher chance of them going unconscious. If I break their fingers, very rarely have we seen or that I've experienced somebody going to sleep. Usually there's just a lot of screaming. So off of the cross wrist grab here, instead of doing to joint locks, I'm going to grab that wrist and now I can go right into larger joint manipulation there. All right. And so we're going to go into one more technique and then we'll just close out this series. The last technique I did want to kind of go over is same side wrist grabs. So for here, I'm going to go right into those side wrist locks that we showed but on the same side, right? So cross grip, you do side wrist locks by doing those types of manipulation. When you want to go into a side wrist lock here, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hip to kind of turn this. My thumb goes right under that knuckle here, and now from that point, I can go right into a side wrist lock. I've practiced all of these while grappling with high-level black belts, and had a lot of success with them. So it's not necessarily the fact of, well, that's going to be easy to get out of. When you are applying them appropriately with proper timing, you can catch a lot of these even on skilled people. So what happens is, same side, my thumb is going right on top as I'm rotating this here. This is a smaller circle. He has more power here to hold this down, right? So what I want to do is I want to use my hip and a small circle to start this off. That pinch there weakens his grip, and then it allows me to go right into a side wrist lock. All right. This is now starting to get into really technical joint manipulation. And since I know my students have progressed to that point, I can end my class. So this is the entirety with maybe a few more extra techniques that I've added in for the video purpose. But this is the entirety of my intro class that I call party tricks, right? So it allows me to introduce myself to my students. It's an icebreaker. We can throw some jokes around. A lot of times in classes where you are doing high level techniques, tactics, you're working with some amazing people. What happens is the students don't know what type of class it is. A lot of times what they do is they come in and they're nervous because they don't actually know how the class is going to progress. So this is an excellent class to just throw at the beginning to get everybody into the understanding that, one, when you're going to be serious, we're going to be serious. That's just part of that class. But you can have a good time during training when you absolutely know that that's what that environment is. It's a relaxed state. So I hope you enjoyed this video series. Once again, I just tried to throw those techniques out quickly. The purpose of a lot of the Elite U techniques or videos is to show how that mentor is doing what they do and why. So I'm not necessarily showing you in a fashion where you may be learning this, where you can actually replicate the technique, because that would be a longer video. I'm showing you what I do and why I do that. And so this is a class that I do all the time, and it does give good results. So I'll see you in the next series.